So if you'll join me in welcoming back to the stage the director of A Fragile Trust, Samantha Grant.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing this film with us. So I guess just where did you start with the story? Like, how did you, what drew you to it? How did you get involved, and how did you get the participation of so many key people from the scandal, from the incident?
So I started working on this when I was in graduate school for journalism, and the Blair affair story is, a key part of every journalism ethics class. So when I first started learning about it, I knew about it when it happened, but when I first started learning about it, I thought, there's some things that don't quite match up here. And I thought, okay, well, there must be a movie about this, and there wasn't. So then I thought, well, I should make that movie, and that's what I did. And that's where I started. And then it was a very long and arduous road to get everybody on board. It took a long time. It took a year of emailing Jason to get him to agree to do the film. And in fact, I actually had to finish my thesis version, which was a short version of the film, without him in it. And then after the fact, he agreed to do the interview with me, probably thinking that the film would never turn into a full feature. And then it did. It just took a long time.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I really wanted to correct the record on was the idea that somehow Gerald Boyd was Jason Blair's mentor, because that was something that was reported, and it, based on everything that I could determine after speaking with people, was not true. And, this whole thing just, I can't even imagine how devastating it must have been for him. I actually didn't get to interview Gerald. As you see, he passed away just 3 years after the scandal. But I did interview his widow, and that interview isn't in the film. But it was heartbreaking. And I think, he was a journalist who was incredible and worked so hard. And, the first line of his obituary mentioned Jason Blair.
Right.
And that's really a tragedy.
Yeah.
So my hope was to just kind of correct the record on that a little bit. My message in the film is Jason Blair is not representative of really anything other than himself. He's not an example of journalism gone wrong. But I think the conversation about ethics in the digital age is key. And I really hope, and our aim with the film and a lot of our outreach efforts surround trying to get people to engage in those conversations. And the truth is that my intention with this film is to get people talking about that kind of thing, broad general audiences, not just journalists, because journalists love to talk about journalism, but the broad general audience is not going to tune in for a film about media literacy. But if you give them something to hang on to, they can leave the theater or, turn off the television and talk about it amongst themselves, and hopefully some of these things will come up, and we're going to work really hard to make sure that those things do come up. Yeah, I actually only budgeted for one animator, and as we got the cut down to about 86 minutes, which is 12 minutes longer than this. It was too long. It became clear to me that we needed something more, another visual tool. And I found this guy, Stuart Langfield, who's the guy who did all the hand-drawn animations, on Vimeo. I just literally was kind of like, where am I going to find someone to do this thing I want to do? Because the animator that I was working with didn't do that kind of thing. He does all these brilliant, beautiful graphics things, but he doesn't do hand-drawn animations. So I looked on Vimeo. I found this guy. I called him up. I was like, I have no money, but I would love to somehow include you. And if you say you'll come on board, I might be able to get more money, which is what happened. And, I think that those black and white hand-drawn animations add so much. And we're actually in the process right now of building a game, an educational game called Decisions on Deadline, which is a partner piece to the film. It's an interactive game that's designed for journalism teachers to teach journalism ethics. And a lot of the look and feel of the game is going to be referenced from the movie. So, I'm hoping to bring Stuart along for a lot more. The question of legal action when it comes to journalism is that it's just not a crime to plagiarize or fabricate. It's, some would say it's a moral crime, but it's not
persecutable.
Yeah, persecutable. Thank you. I was going to say legislatable, but I don't know if that's a real word. Crime.
And none of the families sued him for having misrepresented them?
So, no. And one of the most disturbing things about this whole thing coming down, which was in the longer cut but came out, was that sometimes people would read the paper, like Jessica Lynch's family would read the story about themselves and laugh because it was described that they lived across from a tobacco field, which is not the case. Something Jason just made up. And they just laughed about it. They didn't think it was important to call the paper and say, that's not true. And I think that, there's this disconnect sometimes between the public and the media. And there should be a more two-way relationship. And as a result of this scandal, for the first time ever, the New York Times got a public editor, an ombudsman, who can serve as that intermediary between the public and the paper. Basically, fact-checking is not really fact-checking as you might think of it with like Mother Jones or the New Yorker, magazine, longer form writing is not really a part of daily news, because what that would involve is, I want to be clear about this so people don't get the wrong idea. When you're working and you're reporting stuff, fact-checking is essentially reporting the story all over again. And that doesn't happen in that disciplined way. Usually you're working very closely with an editor, and if there are any red flags, raised, then perhaps your work will get a closer look or something to that effect. But the chain of trust, the fragile trust that Macarena is talking about, upon which really all journalism is built, is not just the trust between the journalist and the public or the journalist and their subject. It's between the journalist and their editors as well. And I think that was really something that came out in this story, because nobody at the New York Times would expect that somebody among their ranks would be intentionally deceiving their editors. And that was going on in this case. And in addition, he was working with different editors, so they weren't talking. It was like a complete communication breakdown that allowed this to go on for so long. From what I could gather, the answer to your question is no. That this treatment, race did not play a role. He did not get special treatment because he was a minority. That's what I've gathered from my reporting on the subject. And, as Hal Raines says, they were reluctant to wash anybody out of that reporting program. And I don't think it would have mattered if he was yellow or purple or black or white. And the fact is that there was a huge reluctance on the part of that program to wash anybody out of the program, whether they come through the minority internship program or some other way. And I really don't think that's the case, which is why I really wanted, that was another misconception that I really wanted to bring forward in the film, that I think it was almost some irresponsible journalism going on at the time, because it was like the easy, obvious story to tell. And people who are opponents of affirmative action really hung on to this story, and it was very unfair to do that. Because that really implicates a lot of other people who are excellent. And if you look at the film is populated with incredible minority journalists who's, were kind of suffering in the wake of this whole thing, because suddenly, they felt like they were suspect because of the behavior of this one rogue person. And, that's just not okay. I also believe, and one of the things that I want to bring forward in the film, that we need institutional journalism now more than ever. The democratization of the media is great. It's great to have all these other voices in the mix, but we need big journalism institutions now more than we ever have before, because an independent journalist, a blogger, is not going to take on a giant corporation and really get the facts out there. They just can't do it. They can't take on the government. But big media institutions can, whether that's in the form of the New York Times or ProPublica or the Center for Investigative Reporting. But we need these institutional journalism organizations. First of all, Macarena Hernandez is my hero. I love her. And I hope that really comes across. The title of the film is something that she just sort of said. Yeah, she's the hero to Jason's anti-hero. And she actually did get offered the job at the Times, But she, once again, made the noble choice when her father was killed in a car accident. She decided to give up her entire career and return home to care for her mother.
So unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up, but Samantha will be moving down towards the lobby, and you can ask her questions still.
Thank you so much for coming.